All right, just finished watching the home opener for the Seattle Storm. They played the Minnesota Lynx. The Minnesota Lynx won, closed out the game very strongly with a convincing win on Seattle's home court. The game was full of twists and turns. I think this first game taught us a lot about both of these teams. What they'll look like this year, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and how high their ceilings are. So both of these franchises are former championship winners with dominant teams in recent memory. And so both of these front offices are trying to get back to that. And I think this sort of game to start the season is really good for both of them to kind of see where they are because they both respect each other at a competition level. Let's talk about the home team first. So last year, the Seattle Storm had their first year without Brianna Stewart and Sue Bird, and it'd be really hard for any team to sustain such massive losses, two of the best players in league history, and still be competitive. And so the Storm weren't competitive at all. They didn't make the playoffs, and the limitations of having a great but streaky shooting guard in Jewel Lloyd as their best player were really exposed. So in the offseason, they swung big. They added offensive help with the free agent signings of the two most coveted true free agents of the offseason, Neko Gwumake and Skylar Diggins-Smith. I did a video on both of those, so if you want to go check that out, please do. But those are two veterans at the tail end of their prime who still can impact the game and add steadiness and focus to the team, which is really what was missing on offense last year. And so the front office hoped that those two additions, plus the development of their young star big, Ezzy Magmagor and Ricky Jordan Horston, would be enough to bring them back to relevance. And you really saw the impact in this game. The pace of the offense was great through most of the game. The ball was moving. Skylar really controlled the pace and had the team in an early rhythm. You could tell Coach Quinn's plan was to pressure the rim and play bully ball, and they were really successful with it from the start. The first Storm points of the game came from a Neko Gwumake layup, and it just continued from there, really set the tone. Nek and Ezzy were amazing, driving and posting up. They were drawing fouls, getting offensive boards, pushing in transition off rebounds. Ezzy was creating her own shots really well, which is something that she wasn't doing when she first came into the league. So that's a steady development over the last few years. So that's really great to see. Nneka got two early fouls, and so she had to sit on the bench halfway through the first, and Mercedes Russell came in for relief. I'm honestly surprised that they retained Mercedes. I thought they would have cut her once they added Nneka, but, in considering Mercedes' injury history. But, I think from the front office's point of view, her size is really valuable since Nneka isn't very tall for a center, and Ezzy isn't very thick and strong. So I'm assuming that that's what they're thinking. We want someone who is both tall and big to be in the paint as a backup. So their post defense was really good this game. I think they really closed out the paint. The Minnesota Lynx really couldn't get to the paint when they wanted to early on, but their perimeter defense was really struggling, and you especially noticed that in the minutes where Mercedes Russell was in. So their perimeter defense wasn't great. I'm worried about how they'll guard teams with much better spacing than the Lynx, such as like the Aces or the Liberty, who have really good shooters. So they were missing Nika Mule due to some visa issues, and so she is a really big strength on the perimeter and defense. So that will improve when she's in the lineup. But in this game, outside of pretty good defense by Sammy Whitcomb, who had actually a really nice block on a three at one point, they were allowing way too much outside the paint. So other players, Jordan Horston really impressed me in this game. So this is her second year in the league. Her role is much more limited this year now that Skylar Diggins-Smith is the true point guard, but she's really shining to start the season in that two-guard spot. She made some incredible plays. At the start of the second, she had a read in the post where she passed up a good shot of her own to make an excellent pass to an open Ezzy Magmagor right under the rim, and she also had some timely shots and active hands. So after a few mistakes to start the game, she really took off late in the first quarter and never looked back. So that's really great to see. Nneka was easily the Storm's best offensive player and easily their most consistent source of offense. Jewel Lloyd was almost non-existent on offense. This is a really bad game from her. She can do this on nights where her shot isn't falling. And, that's what stood out to me as the biggest remaining problem on this team. They wanted to address offense in the offseason, and they did, but it still remains a question. Where will the offense come from when Jewel isn't hitting? It doesn't seem like it's enough. So Jewel and Skylar weren't really hitting their shots, tonight, and neither one of them are reliable scorers, although Jewel's ceiling, when she is on, is as good as anyone in the league. But they're both very streaky scorers, and the other scorers on the team are post players. They're not really shooters. And so what happens when they face a team like the Aces who can shut down the paint with someone like Asia Wilson? So that's what stops me from putting the Storm in that contender tier. They do play the Liberty next week and the Aces next month. So those are two teams with really good length and size in the paint. So we'll see how they play against those two teams. Maybe Coach Quinn has a better plan for that, or maybe Jewel and Skylar Diggins-Smith become more comfortable and we see a better shooting performance for them. But that's one thing that worries me with Seattle. Now on to the Lynx. Like I said, the paint was completely blocked off by the Storm. So Nafisha Collier is a player who likes to get into the paint. She's very strong, and so that was just inaccessible, to her this game. The Storm did a great job there. They got some early fouls on her, and so by 1.5 quarters into the game, she only had 3 points. And the broadcasters mentioned that at that point, it felt like the Storm were up by a lot, but the score was actually really close. It was less than double digits, and Minnesota just kept their composure, and they found other ways to win. I mean, some of that you probably can attribute to their coach, having a veteran coach in Cheryl Reeve, but they just kept their cool and they just kept on with their plan. And the Storm essentially were daring Alana Smith to beat them, and the problem is she did. Last night I was watching the Nuggets game, their semifinals game with the Minnesota Timberwolves, and the Timberwolves coach said during an interview that the plan was to make Jokic beat them, make him a scorer, and the problem was that he scored too much. It was the same sort of thing, last night in that game with the Storm. Alana Smith just kept on making the shots, and, they tried to make her beat them, and then once she started beating them, it was like they didn't know what to do. And so she carried the Lynx until late in the game, and then Courtney Williams started hitting some big shots. Courtney Williams is just one of my, favorite role players to watch, one of the league's best role players. She just fits in anywhere. She just knows when to make her shots. She has that great silky mid-range. She makes great passes. Just a really good decision maker and fit. So she came up big here. And then as time went on, Nafisha started to get going again, and they just stayed the course, and eventually the Storm's offense became stagnant as the lack of outside shooting really started to compound. And in those clutch, gotta have it moments, the Lynx were just better in the fourth quarter. So this is a really great test for the Lynx, I think. What are you going to do when your best player isn't having a dominant game? And they passed it. Now, I still don't see this as being a championship contender. When the Lynx have had this core healthy, led by Nafisha Collier, they've made the playoffs, but they've never really threatened to contend. And I don't think, I like Nafisha, but I don't think she's great enough to be the best player on a championship team. But I do think they have a good foundation, and I think they could get there with a second star. But we'll see. At the end of the year, I think both these teams will be roughly in the same place. I think they're actually pretty evenly matched, even though the final score was heavily tilted in the Lynx's favor. And, I think this might have even been a first or second round Western Conference playoff preview. So we'll just have to see.